Hello and welcome to a new video. Today I am going to talk about books, to be specific, all the books I have read in the month of November. If you didn't know, I am the host of the Climathon, which is a readathon all about the environment, climate change and nature. And also in November it happened to be the Nonfiction November and the Skoden Readathon. So I had a lot of ideas and motivations to read, and today I'm going to talk about all the books I read. If you want to see a bit more of my thoughts while reading or what I was up to during the month of November in general on the island, please feel free to check out my 2 vlogs that I published. I will leave them linked down below. And yeah, there you will get a glimpse into my daily life and my thoughts while reading. While I am going to talk about the books that I've read in the order that I've read them, you will already see a little graphic as to which challenges I have completed. But at the end of the video, I'm also going to talk about the challenges again and about Nonfiction November and Skoden Readathon if I completed anything over there. So the first book that I read and completed was All We Can Save. This is a collection of essays and stories from women, mostly from the US, or pretty much all of them from the US, about, you know, the climate change movement and the fight against climate change and so on and so forth. If you want more in-depth, that's very hard to say, in-depth thoughts on this, please check out the vlog. But overall, I really think this book is very, very, very valuable. And I would love to have a physical copy because I think it's an incredible resource, but it's not like my personal cup of tea, so it will never be a favorite of mine. Mostly because it is just very, very US centric and I'm European, so that's an issue. But also because like I'm not a short story essay collection kind of person, and I had a bit of a problem with the format, and like a lot of the things felt very repetitive and very like, not forced. Forced is not the right word, but I'm lacking the proper word to describe this collection. I felt like it was like very much in a structure that got repeated all the time, and I don't really vibe with that. I was looking for more diversity in which in the ways it was written, but some of the essays really resonated with me, and again, it's an incredible resource that I will for sure go back to. Next, I started and then temporarily DNF'd Notes from the Burning Age from Claire North. This didn't count for any of the Climathon challenges. I still wanted to read it because it's a climate fiction book by an author that I have loved before, but this book, at least the beginning, really didn't vibe with me, which is why I put it down for now. I will try again sometime in the future, just not now. The same happened with this book, which in German is called Mein Weg durch die Wälder, was mich Pilze über das Leben lehrten, and in English it is The Way Through the Woods. This is a book all about mushrooms and grief, and I didn't get very far into it, like only this much. And I just cannot read it at the moment due to mental health. Like the grief aspect in this book, at least in the beginning, I don't know about the rest, but like in the beginning it is very strong, and I can't handle that right now. So I put it down for now, but I will get to this for sure. I also am not counting those 2 temporary DNFs on the bingo board. Again, Notes from the Burning Age didn't fit any challenge anyway, but this would have. But I don't know, it just doesn't feel right. On these kind of things, I don't have like a rule of like, oh, you need to read at least 50% or whatever. I just go by gut feeling, and my gut feeling is telling me not to count this for the Climathon. The next book I picked up was Books and Islands in Ojibwe Country, which is by Louise Erdrich, and this is a short little book, almost like a travel memoir of the author who visits the region of her indigenous ancestors, and it's beautiful, it's quick, the writing was amazing. I had so many pages that I like highlighted and that I sent to other people. Like I made a lot of photos of my Kindle whenever I saw something that I wanted to send to other people, and I took away a lot from it. but it will never be like a favorite book of mine. Like, my memory is already starting to fade on this book, so it didn't have like an incredible impact, but I don't think that is what the book was meant to do. And I know I'm not like the super target audience for this book. I think if I was an Indigenous person, it would have a lot more impact than it did, as it did now with me being a white European person. So I think it's beautiful. I think it's definitely worth the read, but it will probably not be a book that I will put on my shelf anytime soon. However, if you're a fan of Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, go ahead and read this book. It has very similar vibes, it's just very short. Or if you're interested in reading Braiding Sweetgrass, but you're intimidated by the length of that book and the density of that book, Books and Islands is the perfect little book to get you started in that direction. They are very similar in the vibe that they have and the way they are written. And I mean, they're also both by Indigenous authors, so win-win. After this, I picked up the book that probably broke my spirit for the Climathon, which is so upsetting. I spent so many weeks preparing for this readathon and, you know, making all the challenges and all the graphics and thinking exactly what I'm gonna read and being so excited. And then I read this book and I just got so discouraged because I did not enjoy this book at all. The book I'm talking about is The Ice by Lalina Powell. I've talked in length about this in my second vlog, and I just have to repeat it. The author was super supportive of the Climathon, and I'm so grateful for it, which makes it even worse that I did not enjoy this book in the slightest and ended up DNFing it at around 20%. This book, by the way, I am counting. Again, I don't really have a rule of thumb here for this. I just go by gut feeling, and I'm gonna count this one. If you want to hear my full-length thoughts on this book and why I ended up DNFing it, please feel free to check out the vlog. But basically, I think I am just not the target audience for this. And for a book that claims to be like climate environmental fiction, it was very anti that in the tone of the book, because you are reading the story through the main character's point of view, who is a capitalist and who is like very anti-environmentalism. And I assume that throughout the book he you know, grows out of that, I guess, I hope, I don't know. But it was so exhausting to read, because I said this in the vlog too, like, our entire world is shaped by this capitalistic view from older rich men, and I just don't want to spend my time reading a book from that point of view. Also, the character was just horrible as a person, and there was like a lot of like sexism and misogyny in there, which is weird because it's written by a woman, so you would expect that to be a bit better, but okay, I don't know why it was like that. I think the book has value if it ends up in the right hands. I'm just not those hands. I'm no. The book was a big no for me. And basically after that, I barely read anything else. I DNF'd The Ice, I think, on the 18th of November. And after that, I picked up Below the Edge of Darkness, which I am also going to count because I'm still reading it and I'm going to finish it now sometime in early December, I hope. And I am enjoying that book so far. However, just my motivation to read just... it was and is non-existent since The Ice. So basically, since the middle of the month, I have barely read anything, and I'm very disappointed in myself. Because again, I was so excited for this readathon. I mean, it's my own readathon, and I spent so much time preparing it, and I was just so excited for it, and it just didn't go well, not in the books that I was reading, nor in the amount that I was reading, nor in my enjoyment of the whole thing. I assume it's just multiple factors. I think I'm actually in a reading slump. I don't know if The Ice is at fault or just it's just a general reading slump, like mental health is a thing right now in my life. Like this, and this is as Christmassy as it's gonna get for me this year. don't really have an opportunity to celebrate Christmas this year in the middle of like, you know, the renovations and the chaos and the temporary living space and whatnot. So it's not really cozy in my life right now, and it's just, there's just a lot going on. So I think I'm just like in a general reading slump and not in the right headspace. And on top of all of that, in the vlogs you get to see that a little bit. I am having massive sleeping problems lately. In the vlogs it was mostly storms that kept me awake, and to be fair, since October we basically had like one storm after the other, and while winter on the Azores comes with a lot of storms and a lot of rain, we didn't get a break. Like it literally this year, from very early on, from when we in the last couple of years still basically had summer vibes, we had one storm after the other, and we're having another 2 this week alone ahead of us. So like that's a thing, because I can't sleep when there is a storm. But even before that, already since September, since we moved into this temporary space, I've had problems with sleeping. Again, probably mental health, and also just like the space and the stress of everything. And slowly but surely it's getting to me. Like if you ever had sleeping problems over a longer period of time, after a couple of weeks or months, like it really starts to chip away on your brain. And I have such a hard time focusing on anything or really like deeply enjoying anything, because all I ever think about is sleep. And especially when I'm like trying to read nonfiction, where you need like a lot of concentration and focus, I constantly fell asleep. This is what happened to Below the Edge of Darkness, which is why I'm not very far into it, because I just kept on falling asleep every time I picked it up. Even though, to be fair, the beginning of the book is very rough. Like the author, in the very first chapter, everything happens in the first chapter, she goes from, oh look, beautiful bioluminescence, to, by the way, I almost died, and then goes like deep, deep, deep into very heavy medical trauma. And like you're like, whoa, what the hell just happened? That was not what I was expecting when I picked this book up. Whoa, holy hell. And where did that come from? Like I'm in the first chapter. But yeah, that is like a contributing factor why I'm currently not really reading or enjoying reading as much, because I'm just very tired. Besides the climate reads that I had this month, I also read 2 fantasy books, or 1 fantasy, 1 sci-fi book. And one was Legends and Lattes, which I absolutely loved, 5-star, one of my new favorite books. And the other one being Aurora's End by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff, which I listened to via audiobook while I was working in our house. And it was enjoyable, just like the first 2 books. It was like nothing crazy good, but it's entertaining and it's nice to listen to in the background. So I enjoyed this, but will I ever buy the books? Very likely not. Now let's get into an overview of which challenges of which readathons I completed with which books. A little disclaimer, I solely and only focused on the Climathon challenges. I was aware of the challenges of Nonfiction November and Skoden Readathon, but I didn't like pick up books specifically for those readathons. Like I still like participated, and like I also consumed the content that was happening online. But like I didn't like went like, oh, for this challenge I'm gonna pick up this and this book. I'm just gonna take the books that I read for Climathon and apply them to the other challenges, if that makes sense. And if you hear like a weird sound, that's another wave of rain that is happening on the roof. Azores. So for the Climathon challenges, I completed a book set in or at water. For this I read Books and Islands by Louise Erdrich. Read a book set in a snowy or icy setting, The Ice. Read a book about life in the ocean, Below the Edge of Darkness. And yes, I'm still reading it, and yes, I DNF The Ice, but again, I'm counting them. It's my own readathon. I make my own rules. Team Earth, I did not read a book about plants, but I did read a book about animals, or the animal extinction, which again, Below the Edge of Darkness would count for this one. And reading a book about Earth, I could potentially count this one, but I don't know what the logic is that I'm counting Below the Edge of Darkness, but not this book. I cannot tell you why, but I'm not counting. And lastly, Team Human, read a book by an Indigenous author. Books and Islands, Louise Erdrich is an Indigenous author. Read a book about change, All We Can Save counts for this one. And lastly, read a book about consumerism or capitalism, The Ice counts for this one. So as you can see, I have 3 bingos and 2 complete teams, which makes me very excited. That was very unexpected for the fact that, you know, I barely read anything in the second half of the month. So I'm very pleased with myself, despite the Climathon not going as great as I was hoping it would. And for the extra challenges, yes, I read the group book, All We Can Save. I posted on social media, of course, even though now I've deleted social media again, and it feels so good. And for the final bonus challenge, I watched the documentary Mission Blue. You saw that in my second vlog. That's a documentary about like the marine life activist Sylvia Earle. And I thought it was very empowering. I thought it was very good and quick and educational. However, I was missing a bit more inclusion. Like, it was incredibly white. Like, every single person in the documentary was white. And if you make a documentary about like a leading woman scientist, I would expect to also like have highlighted other female scientists in the field, especially because it was always mentioned that she was always like in teams with other people, but it was never mentioned who the other people were. So except for that, it was a great documentary. I would still highly recommend it, but like just go into it knowing that it's very white and very much focused on Sylvia Earle and no one else. And finally, the other 2 readathons that were happening for Nonfiction November, we had 4 prompts this year, like very vague words that you could interpret however the hell you want, which is great because it usually means you can achieve it easily. The words for this year were record, element, secret, and border. And for the word record, I'm gonna choose All We Can Save because everyone in this book talked about like the record breaking something, and also I think it's like a record number of female activists being active, and like, yeah, I think it counts. And it's also like a great record of women in climate activism. So I'm gonna count this book for this. For element, I could count any of the water books really. So Below the Edge of Darkness or The Ice or Books and Islands. Whatever, all work. For secret, I could count The Ice because there is like this murder mystery thing going on, but I never got that far into the book, so no. But Below the Edge of Darkness talks about this world that is like so foreign to us, and I think that counts very well as a secret. Like, it's like this secret world that we just don't know about, and that seems very mysterious. So yeah. And finally, for border, I would count Books and Islands by Louise Erdrich, because not only does she cross a border within the book, but I mean, we all know that the borders in North America, or in most parts of the world actually, were not made by the indigenous people, and that is causing a lot of trouble. And for example, she talks in the book in one scene also about like when she was crossing the border, she had her like infant daughter with her, and she was like scrutinized, and like people wanted to know, like they wanted to prove that it was her child because they didn't believe that she as an indigenous woman had this baby with her. And so yeah, like crossing borders for indigenous or marginalized people can be very difficult, especially if you think about the fact that those borders just divide your country of your people that is like basically still being colonized by now a majority of people living there. So it's very complex and complicated. And speaking of indigenous, the Skoden Readathon, which I hope will happen again and does not like completely clash with everything else, because I think the readathon is so awesome. Please check out the Native Lady Book Warrior. Please check her out, she's awesome. And I hope that next time I can properly participate, but for now, the only book I've read is Books and Islands, and it would count for unread Indigenous author as well as nonfiction. So only 2 of the challenges, unfortunately, but I hope there will be another round that fits better with my timeline so I can participate properly. Okay, this was a lot, so I'm gonna wrap this up really fast. I hope you guys are having a fantastic day, and I see you next weekend with another renovation video. Goodbye!